Okay. Good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to the Careers with Classics 2002 event. It is organized by the Department of Ancient Classics here at Maynooth University with the support of the Careers Services. My name is Cosetta Cadau, and today I will lead this event with an audience of 7 international speakers, some in person and some online, and students linking in mostly online from all Irish secondary schools and third-level institutions, Maynooth, but not only. We have students logging in from UCD, Trinity, and Galway as well. We also have guidance counselors logging in today, everybody very eager to find out about opportunities in the employment with a degree in classics. This is the 2nd year in a row that we are running this event, and we are very happy to welcome you all remotely and in person in the brand new TSI building at Maynooth on the campus. It's fantastic to see such a great response to the initiative, and we plan to continue organizing events to support not only students who graduate in classics, but also we would like to showcase how classics fits in an ever-changing professional landscape in Ireland and in Europe. So I'm just going to say a couple of words about the rationale behind this event. Classics is the study of the civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome, language, literature, but also art, archaeology, philosophy, and history. Traditionally, the study of classics focused on Greek and Latin language and literature, but in more recent years, this has changed, and we've seen a great flourishing of courses on Greek and Roman civilization in literature, where the literature is studied in translation, and in which consideration is also given to other kinds of achievements of the Greeks and the Romans and the Mediterranean world, such as their art, as society, and architecture. Classics is not a vocational line of study. You learn a discipline, but you also learn some skills, which are what will stand you in a solid position for a very broad range of jobs. And that's the message that we would like to convey to everyone today. Some skills, such as accountancy, for example, may become redundant in time, but the skills you learn through a degree in classics and also in other arts degrees, so we're not saying classics is unique, such as problem solving, communication skills, analysis and research, will never become redundant. In our fast-changing world, a few degrees are directly applicable to one's profession, and so increasingly employers look for graduates who are flexible and open-minded, creative, critical and articulate, but most importantly, graduates who can deliver on a project on time. Many of these qualities are fostered by studying classics. In addition, graduates can choose to specialize in a more vocational or specialized subject. So one can study classics and then do a postgraduate course, such as a 1-year MA or a higher diploma in an entirely different topic, such as marketing. These are called conversion courses. So where do classics graduates work? There are more companies than you think that are hiring graduates from any discipline. 25–30% of graduate programs offered by professional services and corporations to Maynooth have no subject restrictions. So that means that graduate positions are offered to candidates of any discipline. These companies include KPMG, Accenture, Apple, Google, etc. Small and medium-sized companies also advertise jobs on the careers portal. Companies can offer between 40 and 400 jobs each year. The average salary for a graduate position is 30K per annum, and all posts are generally filled within the year. So when recruiting graduates, employers mostly hire candidates who graduated on time, not in a specific subject, but simply on time. And students are most likely to do so if they choose a subject that they enjoy. The Career Service of Maynooth offers support throughout the entire application process, including a CV writing tool and interview practice. The student survey is run by the Career Service and is sent to graduates 9 months after their graduation. According to 2002 survey, classics graduates learn 5 key skills. The ability to deal with a variety of material and to source and use information, resources such as archives and libraries and databases independently and critically. The ability to write and communicate effectively and to formulate and support an argument. To think outside the box, to conduct independent and self-led research. The ability to engage in group projects and data analysis. The ability to complete written tasks to a high standard and deadline, how to structure and manage time, prioritization, organizational skills. These skills will not go out of circulation and are useful and prized in many fields, whether it be education, journalism, law, politics, publishing, or business. In addition to these transferable skills, classics forms the indispensable background for understanding our living European heritage, and as such can make us as citizens more responsible, independent-minded, and adaptable. You will acquire a deep understanding of factors that shape societies and a well-formed awareness of others' viewpoints and cultural identity, making you an ideal candidate and a valuable asset to a broad and diverse range of professional fields, such as human resources, recruitment, membership organizations, governmental organization, legal services, advertising, etc. So what can classics do for you? Today's event aims to address the key needs that emerge from the survey and provides a much-needed opportunity to discuss the future of classics graduates and to explore the diverse range of professional contexts in which they work. We are proud to welcome to the department 7 classics graduates, some from our department here at Maynooth, who have found success in a variety of exciting careers, marketing and banking, HR and business development, professional services, the education sector, and academic policy and administration. Desmond, Ellen McVie, Rachel, Megan, Michael, Luca and Helen Collier have kindly agreed to talk to us today about their work and their paths, the paths they have taken since leaving classics, and help us understand how to best market their skills. This event aims to be as interactive as possible, so there will be a Q&A session at the end of our interviews, but also feel free to raise your hand or type your questions in the chat section and I'll address them as we go. So let's begin. I'm gonna just say a few words about the career path and the bio of our speakers before we start so that we all know who they are. Desmond O'Toole, thank you. Good morning. Welcome, Desmond. Left school in the 1980s after his A-levels and stumbled into the global communications, telecommunication industry at a time when it was liberalizing across the world. How exciting. He spent over 20 years in the industry, working around the globe, leading high-performance service and account management teams, looking after very large business accounts, such as global banks and other corporations. Desmond took one of those midlife career change deals and used the time to start a degree course in Maynooth as a mature student, finally graduating with a double first-class honors degree in medieval Irish and Greek and Roman civilization. Rather than return to industry, he wanted to do something very different and much more aligned with his personal values. Desmond started working as an industrial relations official with the Association of Secondary Teachers Ireland, a trade union organizing post-primary school teachers, and he has been here for over 10 years. In his own words, it's an extraordinary role in which you are typically negotiating solutions to industrial relations issues, but often also need to be comfortable with dealing with conflict. The most important takeaway from Maynooth and the classics degree I studied there, how to think clearly, how to frame and win an argument, and when all fails, how to handle a hoplite spear. Rachel Travers, welcome Rachel, studied for 5 years at Maynooth University. She completed a BA in Arts and in Greek and Roman civilization and history, and also has a master's in classics. Rachel moved to UCD to complete a professional diploma in education. Post-qualification, she worked for 2 years as a substitute teacher and learning support teacher. During these years, Rachel also worked in a department store as a sales advisor and then sales advisor. Oh, sorry, that's the same. These experiences then brought her to Engage Ireland in April 2014, where she has been since. Rachel is now the manager of the Irish office. Engage Education Ireland helps Irish teachers and support staff secure teaching jobs in schools in England. In addition to this, they also run a salaried PGCE through the University of Coventry, the National Institute of Teaching and Education. Rachel's role is so diverse and involves sourcing, generating, and vetting quality candidates for teaching positions in schools in the UK. Rachel also presents webinars and workshops and attends university career fairs all over the country. Megan Carson, who joins us online today, began studying Latin in secondary school, and her passion for the subject continued, hello Megan, on into university. She graduated from Maynooth in 2021 with a BA in Mathematical Studies and Latin, having also studied Greek and Roman civilization in her first year. Megan immediately took up a position in mortgage servicing as a loan administrator, specializing in account mandates. Her team calculates the fees and interest, operates the bank accounts, and moves the funds associated with hundreds of large-scale commercial real estate deals. And she has the additional responsibility of ensuring that those bank accounts meet the requirements of any contract relating to the loans. Megan has dealings with all major banks and real estate investment companies, and her own portfolio spans Ireland, the UK, and Australia. While one may at first think that the mathematical side of her degree would be what most prepared her for her job, Megan was surprised to find how useful the skills she gained through her study of Latin actually were, and how they gave her a significant edge over other candidates. Michael Williams, who joins us online. Welcome, Michael. Studied for a BA in history and then an MPhil in political thought at the University of Cambridge. A brief assignment on Cicero prompted him to take a course in ancient history out of sheer curiosity. And Michael discovered that the nuts and bolts of historical argumentation came much more clearly into focus when trying to reconstruct the ancient world. The challenge was interesting enough that Michael ended up transferring to the Faculty of Classics in Cambridge to write a PhD on the later Roman Empire. Having never encountered the classics at school, he had to pick up as much Latin and Greek as he could in the process. Michael went on to take up short-term teaching positions in universities in the UK and the US before joining Maynooth University in 2008 as a lecturer in Roman history in the Department of Ancient Classics. 10 years later, personal circumstances brought Michael to the Netherlands, where he first worked as an editor and proofreader for academic authors, and where he is now a grants advisor at the University of Amsterdam. Classes now rarely comes up in Michael's working day, but he still sometimes sees the value of his training in any number of unexpected places. Ellen McVie, hi Ellen, welcome, is the founder of HM Classics Academy, a tutoring company which provides online classes in ancient languages and a variety of topics connected to ancient Greece and Roma. Ellen started her undergraduate degree at the age of 25 with the Open University, followed by a master's degree in classics and ancient history from Queen's University Belfast. She has worked in hospital administration as a tour guide for the National Trust and as a primary school classroom assistant, all while teaching classical Greek at evening classes. When Helen's tutoring grew to such an extent that she had to give up her day job, the pandemic struck and classes moved online, which opened up a global audience. She's passionate about ancient Greece and is continually inspired by her students' enthusiasm. Helen's most recent exam class gained A and A grades at GCSE level, which is equivalent to junior cert level in Ireland. Luca, who joins us online, welcome Luca.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Okay. Wrote his BA and MA at the Cagliari University, PhD at the University of South Florida after an education in classics, and he has worked across disciplines between history, archaeology, biochemistry, doing research and teaching in various forms. He specializes in the application of biochemical methods to gain insights into ecology, climate, and society in Mediterranean prehistory. After postdocs in Sardinia and in Cambridge, since 2019, he lives in North Carolina, where he is currently assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology. Thank you, Luca. I'm going to introduce Helen, who also joins us online just before her presentation. Okay, so Helen Collier online is our last 7th speaker, so I'm going to introduce her later on. Okay, without much further ado, I'm gonna leave the floor to Desmond, who is our first speaker. And yes, thank you, Desmond.
Right, everyone. I don't know whether you can see my wonderful face or whether you're looking at a very stark black and white image here. Either way, I'm delighted to be here. There are two faces that I recognise, one online, Michael Williams, who I only met for a short time when I was here previously, and of course, Kieran here, who the level of inspiration that members of this faculty delivered for me when I was here some years back, about 12, 13 years ago, was quite extraordinary and changed my life, not so much in the job that I do, but certainly in my outlook on life. And it's something I'm forever grateful to the members of this faculty for. So thank you, Kieran and Michael, and also now Cosetta for inviting me here today. When I told my mother that I was doing this, she says, "What? You're going back to Maynooth?" She says, so that was nice of her to say. But anyhow, just a little bit about myself. I was born in Dublin, but I grew up in Birmingham. My parents left here, the usual story of immigrants. There was no work in Ireland, so they went to Birmingham. My mother went because she was not happy with the overbearing atmosphere here in Ireland, but we ended up in Birmingham. And if you think about the sorts of things that Birmingham's well known for, you probably can't recall any. It's an industrial city in the heartlands of the United Kingdom, well known for heavy metal, whether it's the Ozzy Osbourne Black Sabbath variety or whether it's the car manufacturing variety. And it was my father worked in the car manufacturing industry that brought us there. I managed to get home in 1998, and I've been living at home in 1998, living here in Lucan since 1998. So just a little bit about my career path. I don't propose to spend a great deal of time on that. I'm not very good talking about myself. I'd rather talk about the subject that we're here for today. But when I was at school, I was one of those students that was clever, but unfocused and not really terribly well engaged. I understand that there are some teachers on the call today. That's wonderful. I'm sure some of them are members of my union, the ASTI, which is even more wonderful. And I thank you. I thank you for turning up today. But I graduated from the school I was at in Birmingham with 10 O levels and 4 A levels. So at least there was a brain there. It just wasn't terribly focused or terribly engaged. And I went to work for the British Telecom Group in Birmingham, and not only in Birmingham, but I ended up traveling the world working for the organization just as that industry was globalizing and liberalizing. It was a quite extraordinary experience. Some of the weight that I carry still was generated during that period. It was a wonderful period, but like all, it also gave me the opportunity to move home to Dublin in 1998 when British Telecom set up a joint venture here with the ESB. And as I said, I've been home since 1998. I took that chance, that midlife chance. You know, when you look at your life, you go, and this is grand, this is all very well, but there must be something else out there. And decided I wanted to make a career change, but I didn't want to make that career change from one to the next one. What I wanted to do was to take a gap in the middle of that. And I thought I might as well do something very useful with my time. And I might as well put those O levels and A levels to good use and go to university. I live in Lucan. The nearest university was Maynooth, so it seemed like an obvious choice. And then when I came here, it was quite extraordinary, actually. I came here to do an arts degree. Again, unfocused, not engaged, wanting to find something to settle on. And I really wanted to do medieval Irish, growing up in England, you know, identity, all those types of issues, wanting to know about the country, the nation that we'd come out of. And I also wanted to do anthropology. Anthropology, I liked Dr. Jamie Saris made a comment once, I remember, that anthropology is not about finding better answers. It's about asking better questions. And I like the fluidity in that idea of a subject. And then what did I do? What would I do for the third subject? The subject that you do for a year that you then drop in. You'll notice how calmly that was done, hey? Between an academic and a trade union official, you've got two of the calmest people on the planet here. So I was looking for that third subject to study, and I was thinking about history, perhaps, or something like that. Something, I hate to use the term generic, but something like that. And it was a friend of mine recommended taking a look at classics. Now, for a working class boy from a metal bashing centre of the UK, Birmingham, classics was not exactly something I was terribly familiar with. But I thought I'd sit in on one of the start of the year lectures and take a listen to it. And it was Dr. Kieran McGraw who was delivering that lecture. And almost from the start, the sort of scales fell from my eyes almost. It was a fascinating subject, and I'd never appreciated that. Classics, the Romans, the Greeks, was something which was quite separate and distant from what my life was about. And then there was a comment in presenting the case for classics that Dr. McGraw made when he was talking about Aristotle, someone whose name I did know at that stage, and I knew why he was famous, describing slaves as animate tools. And that was like a kick to the chest. I'd never heard something so outrageous and vulgar, but intellectually so stimulating. How could a society that is well known for its art and its philosophy, and yes, its violence and its misogyny, how can a society like that refer to other human beings in such cold and calculated terms? So I decided that I would do classics for a year. Long story short, I ended up dropping the anthropology with its beautiful questions and continuing with the classics and medieval Irish and coming out with the first class honours in both those subjects that I got. And then from that, when I graduated, I went on eventually, followed my parents into the labour movement, and I became an employee of the Association of Secondary Teachers Ireland. I know this, as I said, there's some guidance counsellors on here today and possibly some other teachers. If there are, then I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are members of the ASTI. Solidarity to you. I'm great that you're here. As I said, if you're ever talking to the General Secretary over the next few months, mention me to him. He'd be delighted to hear your stories about my presentation today. But whatever brings you here, I'm delighted to have been invited back for this. When I'm talking to student teachers and indeed to others about why join the ASTI, why join the trade union movement, I run this video, a video of a principal sitting behind a desk with a piece of paper in front of her. Just come into my office, just you and I. Sit down, we'll discuss your contract, we'll discuss your pay or how the workload that you have, just you and I. But it never is when you go into a conversation or a meeting with your boss. There are always people sitting behind her as she pushes the contract across the table to you. Human resources. You know, there are human resources people here today, love you to bits, but there are human resources behind there. Lawyers in schools or boards of management or an education and training board officials, the Department of Education itself. There are a whole host of people standing behind your principal in that room. And the point about being a member of the ASTI or any other of the teacher trade unions in this country is that you have 18,000 of us standing behind you, including industrial relations official like myself. So when you go into a meeting with your principal, just you and her, it's never just her in the meeting, and it's never just you. So you go in there with the strength and the numbers that come from being a member of a trade union. And that's the essence of the power of trade unions, is the control that we get, the influence that we get by virtue of our numbers. So what's that got to do with a classics degree, and how relevant is a classics degree then to trade unionism? There are a number of the assets and the skills that Cosetta was talking about earlier. And this is how I perceive it. We can all think clearly, we can all still think in a structured manner. Lots of degree courses teach you how to do this, but there's a particular clarity and a particular organization in learning from the Platos, the Socrates, the Aristotles, and many others through the medium of the teachers, the lecturers who teach this and engage with you in argument on it. And talking about arguments, how to frame and win an argument. That's essential in any job. It's spectacularly important in the role of a trade union official, because I spend a lot of my time involved in argument. And occasionally I spend some of my time involved in picking up a spear and going to war with someone. Conflict is an essential part of trade unions. It's a real important part of what we do. So it is a joke giveaway there, but it is an essential part, as I said, of what we do. And these are the skills that the degree that I studied here in classics at Maynooth, I feel gave me. I could already think and, at a structured way. I'd been working in the telecommunications industry for a long time beforehand, but had to work at these kinds of levels. But there's a particular acuity and a particular insight that you gain from classics when you're thinking about, when you are thinking about something, and about framing and winning the argument, whether it's in paper, whether it's face to face, whether it's in quite a lot of things that I do on fitness to practice hearings for teachers. I'm the specialist in the ASTI that looks after that. I drove past their building on the way in here today, just the other side of the motorway. And indeed of running industrial action, which I'm actually very, very good at. But then that really shouldn't surprise the people who know me at all well. But there's one thing else, one final thought that this gave me as well. When I was here, there was an opportunity to go with the Classical Association of Ireland, to go to Athens and the surroundings and the Peloponnese for a couple of weeks on an academic tour. So all the sites that I'd read about and had heard about in lectures, these beautiful and extraordinary places that when you see them in situ, just absolutely blow your mind. And then on one of the final days that I was in Athens, we were in the National Archaeological Museum there, and looking at the beautiful images and pottery and all of the rest of it. But there was this one image, a fresco on the walls, actually on the ground floor. It wasn't, you didn't have to walk far into the building to see this fresco. And I can recall even now standing in front of that, coming from a heavy metal car working background, with no interest in art. DDI music maybe, but that'd be about the limit of it. No real interest or engagement with art. But I stood in front of this Mycenaean woman for her image, and I started to tremble. I started to shake. That has never, ever happened to me before, or indeed since. It's not something I'm prone to doing. And it was an extraordinary engagement with this image and with the woman whose image it was of. You see her carrying fish. She appears to be in some kind of a procession when you look at the wider images in that section of the museum. And the academic who was leading us around that, was a young German doctor, he actually came walking over and stood behind me because he could actually see me physically responding to the image. I didn't know whether he was worried I might trip and fall or something, or whether he just wanted to share vicariously in the experience that I had. So studying classics for me was about, yes, the skills that I learned about thinking and articulating, winning arguments, and about managing conflict. But it was also that first introduction in my life to the experiencing art. And that was quite extraordinary. And that is the only thing, that is the thing that is offered by classics that arguably is rarely offered by other subjects. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Desmond. Now we are going to have a short contribution from Megan, who joins us online. Can you speak? So just we check that we can all hear you. Hello, hi.
Hi.
So I'm going to ask Megan one of the key questions that we want to ask anybody who lives classics, and it is, how do you think, as a degree in classics, prepared you, enabled you, or led you to your current profession?
Well, first and foremost, I'd just like to thank you for having me here. I'm absolutely delighted that, even though I graduated over a year ago, I'm still able to be involved in classics at Maynooth. So thank you very much for having me. But in terms of how my degree prepared me, enabled me, etc., in all honesty, my classics degree doesn't have any particular direct relation to my current profession, mortgage servicing, as you might have. Sorry, Cassette, I think there might be some feedback. Just online, I think we're hearing me both. Well, I'm hearing myself twice over.
If you mute your own mic, because that's yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds better. Thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, as I was saying, classics degree doesn't have really any direct relation to my career in mortgage servicing, as you might have guessed, but it's helped me so much. Like as Cassetta mentioned, Latin helped me significantly more than mathematics side of my degree, which to me and to I'm sure many people is a very surprising thing to hear. The main skills Latin taught me, things like, problem solving and logic, they've aided me in seeing through all of the red tape and the bureaucracy I have to deal with on a daily basis. And that lets me find like the simplest and most effective solutions to the problems that me and my team face on a daily basis. I'm able to treat all the different bits of information I have to work with like little puzzle pieces, and then I can put them together in a way that makes sense, much like I would with a Latin translation. When you're working through a few lines of Latin poetry, for example, you have to find the verb, which is used at the end of the sentence because Latin doesn't use our word order, and then find the subject, and then find the object, and then put that all together in a way that makes some sort of sense with all the other words that are lying about. And working with banks and investment companies can be incredibly difficult, especially when you're trying to understand all the legal jargon that they assume you know when you really don't. But I find that sitting for a few minutes with what I like to call my Latin brain firmly switched on, being able to put all those little pieces together and work out the bigger picture always gives me a fantastic solution to whatever problem we have. Latin also gifted me these fantastic analysis skills and attention to detail, which, given that I spend much of my day dealing with like the really extensive legal contracts that are so convoluted, incredibly difficult to understand, that is an invaluable couple of skills. Terms or clauses in a legal contract can rely on several of the same scattered throughout hundreds of pages of legalese, and I'm not joking when I say hundreds of pages. And being able to keep several pieces of information in my head while also reading through another is such an invaluable, important skill that saves me so much time just on a general daily basis. I think this is something that comes from Latin translations as well. Latin is an inflected language, which means it's not the word order that matters, but the word endings. So changing one letter in a Latin word can change the meaning quite significantly. And being able to catch that letter change and being able to figure out the meaning has in turn helped me to catch any mistakes that are made before documents are passed on to external departments and external parties, which saves us, really importantly, saves us reputational damage and the cost of rework. We handle large sums of money for borrowers and lenders, and understandably, they really don't like it when their money is mismanaged. A borrower overpaying or a lender underpaying, even something as little as €5, depending on who you're dealing with, can have a massive impact on our working relationship, and it doesn't look good for us. But being able to catch these mistakes, being able to prevent them, firstly, keeps everyone happy and, stops the angry emails flooding our inbox. Then, there's the general skills that you'll get with pretty much any degree. There's organization and time management. Everything in finance is about working to a deadline. But luckily enough, I had plenty of practice of that in studying Latin. We had set translations that had to be done for every class. We had essays, exams that felt like they were just always looming over us. And when some borrowers and lenders can be incredibly demanding and give us incredibly tight deadlines to work towards, which can often seem impossible, I still have those skills that I gained from studying Latin that let me take a step back and think about, okay, how am I going to effectively prioritize my work here? And how am I going to multitask in the interim to get things done as quickly and effectively as possible? And that means that now it's rare that I don't meet a deadline, thankfully, and fingers crossed for that carrying on. But that means at least that, for me, I have a generally positive relationship with all my clients because of these skills I learned from Latin. I really feel that, like, if you know which profession, if you want to know which profession classics will lead you directly into, it is quite obvious. It's going to be something like teaching or lecturing or working in research or in a museum, which, if classics is your passion and you want to pursue it as a career, these are all great options. These are fantastic things you can do. But when it comes to professions classics can prepare you for, that's a very different kettle of fish because the options are limitless. As Cassetta mentioned, what matters is developing transferable skills, which a degree in classics certainly will help you to do. Given the number of skills Latin taught me myself and how well it taught me them, I don't think it's very surprising that that's what's prepared me for my current career. And I genuinely think no matter what industry or career I've gone into, classics would have helped me so much. I think there is this sort of massive misconception, and which I used to believe too, coming into university just 4 years ago, that's what I thought too, that your degree has to be directly related to your future career. You pick, if you want to study finance, if you want to go into finance, you must study finance. And once you've picked your degree, that is your career and you're stuck in that forever. This is the only industry you can work in. And that's not true. It's really not. That only applies to very specific areas like medicine and law. If you do your research, there's a very strong chance that you'll be able to do something you enjoy, classics, and you can develop some sound skills and go on to whatever career you have in mind. At the end of the day, it's the skills that you gain that matter. It's not the degree itself. And for me, classics gave me so many skills that have led me exactly to where I am right now, and I couldn't be happier.
Thank you very much, Megan. That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're moving on to another individual contribution now, and this time is Michael Williams, who joins us from Amsterdam. Michael, the floor is yours. Do you have any slides you want to share? You can manage yourself, yeah?
Yes, there won't be any slides. I haven't got a presentation.
Perfect.
I think it's very interesting to be following both Desmond and Megan because things they've said there both relate to my own career, I suppose. One of them is that I followed what might seem the obvious career path with classics, as Megan says, that I became a lecturer for a long time. Since then, as Cosetta said at the beginning, I've moved on from that or moved away from that, and I'm currently a grants advisor in the University of Amsterdam. So I still work in the academic world. I spend my time advising academics in their research proposals, looking for money, from PhDs up to professors. But while I was a lecturer in classics and Roman history for 15 years, I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about how I got to that point, because although, again, the idea that you can use a training in classics to become a classics lecturer is not that exciting or revolutionary. What I think is interesting is the fact that, like Megan and like Desmond, I came into classics without any preparation at all. That I, like a lot of people, had no classics training at school. I didn't take any courses. I didn't take any Greek or Latin. As an undergraduate, I didn't even take an undergraduate degree in classics or even in ancient history. And likewise, my master's, as Cosetta said, was in political thought. I only really moved into a faculty of classics and studied classics as such as a PhD student. What I went in to do at my undergraduate degree was history, and in fact, the more modern history, the better. I went in trying to do the 20th century, did as much of that as I could. And in a way, I was very lucky that I was obliged by the way the course was structured in Cambridge to take a course, a module that focused before 1700. And I tried to cheat by doing the history of political thought because I thought, well, there's no real history in that. I can just read a few books. But in doing that, I read Cicero's De Officiis, which I wouldn't recommend as a place to start with Cicero. And the book itself wasn't that exciting, but I did come across this and think, well, I know about Cicero. I've heard the name Caesar, these people that came up in the reading around I was having to do. And I felt I didn't know anything about them, and this was something I wanted to look into. So when I had a few other options in my undergraduate degree, I took a couple of ancient history courses. And first of all, I wanted to learn about Roman history. And I took a course that I hoped would get me to Cicero and Caesar, but it covered Greek and Latin. And I was so bad at it, it was so different from anything I'd ever done, that I never got past the Greeks. I had to spend all my time just learning about Greek history, just to get a hang of what you do when you study ancient history and how different it is. And that for me was really, again, as Cosetta mentioned in the bio, the revelation in my interest in history, that as a historian, you're used to working with sources, with texts. In the modern world, it's very often newspapers or diaries or archives. With ancient history, there's almost none of that. It's all very scattered. There's very little evidence. There's not much that we know, and what we know is in a different language that I didn't even read at the time. This forces you to really think about how you are going to reconstruct this world, what actually happened. Whereas in modern history, it's very easy to take for granted what happened. In the ancient world, the first step is really kind of, do we even know anything? What can we actually find out? And what is the evidence that we're using to make that claim? So in a way that I guess a lawyer would find familiar, you really are focused on the building blocks of your argument, the building blocks of any claim that you're trying to make. And that for me was a revelation. It really threw into focus what I was doing as a historian, and it made real sense for me. Now, having said that, I didn't intend to then go on and carry on with ancient history. My master's, as I said, was in political thought. I hadn't done terribly well in that course as an undergraduate, and there's a perverse streak in me that wants to do the things I found difficult. So I went back and studied political thought. But I'd intended to do this with a focus on the Reformation. The supervisor I had lined up to do that turned out to be ill that year and wasn't able to supervise me. So in a kind of panic, or with a very short space of time available to me, I went back to one of the ancient history professors I'd been working with and who I'd got on with very well. And I ended up thinking up a project with him and working with him. And that turned out to be Roman history in the later Roman Empire. And that relationship worked. I found I could do something and say something in that field. And I ended up then going on to do my PhD with that professor in that field. So really, this is a large accident for me that I ended up doing ancient history at all, let alone classics. And I think this is very often people's story, that unless you have that kind of preparation and you have a deep love for classics, very often it's something that people fall into and recognize the value of after the fact. And as I say, that seems to me to have been both Megan and Desmond's story. But I think that value is very significant and very important. It was, as I said, the study of ancient history that really made history clear to me. And I think if you're interested in history and you only study the modern period, you're not really getting what it's about. I mean, maybe you can, but having that extra perspective, that extra background, really for me clarified everything that I was doing. But of course, after that, when I did my PhD in ancient history and I did it in a classics faculty, I then had to think about jobs. And at that point, I was definitely interested to see if I could become an academic, if I could have an academic career. That is luckily what I did and what worked out for me. But at that time and in those circumstances, it seemed to me the best way of becoming an ancient historian was to do it in a classics faculty. That's the way the British and the Irish system is set up. And that meant that as well as doing the research I was doing, I would have to be ready, if not to teach, then at least to engage with other parts of classics, with the languages, with the literature, with the philosophy, sometimes even with the art and archaeology, and these things that I had no training in really at all, and which I had to pick up, not even during my PhD, but after my PhD. So that, again, exposed me to something that I hadn't had that much experience of, and it really showed me that a lot of these things are interconnected. But again, as a historian, it's very easy to focus on the few documents, the few sources you're looking at, the things that you want to reconstruct. But to think further about, well, how does that fit in with what else is going on at the time, with the literature of the time, with the philosophy of the time, with the art that's around people, the reconstruction of their cities. These are all things that are now brought into modern history, but at the time, they were already a little bit new, or they were kind of fairly recent, that people were actively looking at, well, how does the literature of a period relate to the history of a period? The new historicism was a relatively fashionable thing at the time. So this breadth that you get from classics is, for me, one of the most interesting, one of the most valuable things that I've learned from it, that you are first forced to see everything in terms of a society that exists in the round, as it were, not just the few people that were doing certain things, not just, as it's very easy to be focused on in modern history, not just the politics or the military side or whatever else you might be interested in, but actually, well, what exactly is going on in this whole society, and how does this whole society work? What does it do all day? And again, so this element of breadth for classics was what really struck me. And I think that also leads to very many of the things, just to refer back to Megan, that Megan raised, that the skills that you learn, the attention to detail, the ability to analyze, and above all, I think the confidence in the face of a whole mass of unwelcome, forbidding detail that you don't know about, that's something that isn't just about Latin translations, although it comes in there too. But with the whole of classics, there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening in the ancient world that seems very strange to us at first sight, that's very difficult to fit in and to understand why it's happening at all. And having some sort of classical training, if nothing else, gives you that confidence to approach it and say, there is a way in which this makes sense, or this made sense once, so there must be a way that I can make sense of it myself now. So for me, that sort of training, including with Latin and Greek, really showed me that you don't have to be scared of what your subject is. You don't have to just stick with the things that you know, with the things that are familiar, that you can be exposed to things that are wholly unfamiliar to you. You might recognize the names, but the world itself is very different. And you can still go ahead and do it and say something about it and find something useful for you. Just to finish up, I'll let other people speak, but to finish up with my career path, having kind of learned all these things, or while I was still developing all these things, I was working as a lecturer in the US, the UK, and most of all in Ireland. And I should say, the fact that I was mobile made it easier for me to get that sort of position, being young and being able to travel. It's not always available to everybody. Those jobs really suited me, I thought, and I was very happy to be a lecturer at Maynooth for as long as I was, and to help the students, some of whom indeed are here and speaking today, to do the same sort of things, and not to pass on to them facts. And my dirty secret really is that I'm not interested in the ancient world as such. I don't have a great love for Romans or for Greeks or for all these things that people assume that there's a passion behind it when you go into to be a lecturer. That my passion is not for the ancient world as such, but it's for both engaging with people and trying to think about how you construct an argument, how to think about my subject as a discipline. Again, I'm a historian. I wanted to know, how do we think about the world? How do we reconstruct the past? Now, that for me was the real benefit of being able to work as a lecturer, the real privilege of being able to work as a lecturer. Ultimately, personal circumstances. My partner is also a university lecturer in classics, and she had a permanent job in Amsterdam. I had a permanent job in Ireland, and we had to choose which one we would go with. I ended up choosing to go to Amsterdam and finding other sorts of positions, other sorts of things I could do with that work. But the same sort of focus in the end has stayed with me, both in the two things that I've done since then. I worked as an editor and a copy editor, a proofreader, and that requires exactly that sort of attention to detail, that sort of readiness to deal with legal language, with all sorts of things that are totally unfamiliar to you, and yet find the sense in them and to reconstruct them. And then now working as a grants advisor, that confidence to be able to deal with anything that's thrown at you is really important. That I work with humanities professors, most of all, humanities scholars, and they can be working on anything from psycholinguistics to forensic archaeology, to experimental literature. And all of these things are unknown to me. I have very little experience in them. But again, having that experience of thinking, well, here is something that I don't know about, but I can find out about it. I can look at where the argument works. I can look at this material, the names and the language is unfamiliar, but there's something I have to say about it, something I can find to say about it. That for me is the most important thing that classics taught me. I'll let others speak.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thanks very much. Thank you. So building up on your very last point, Michael, I would like to ask a question that goes back to the value the classics, bring to a graduate, but in particular, a graduate seeking employment in 2022. And I would like Megan to answer that question, if you can. Thank you.
Yeah. As a graduate who is seeking employment in 2021, I actually feel like I might have a clue about this one. For me, a degree in classics gave me, as I mentioned, the opportunity to develop such a wide range of skills. Like I said, it taught me problem solving and analysis. There's also language skills and public speaking. And that was all just through working translations. Some of them we do together in class, and you'd be having to talk to people about what you thought it was and take that risk of being completely and utterly wrong, which I often was. And that's just the key ones, studying ancient civilization for me for just that 1 year in first year, which I'm always grateful that I had the opportunity to do through the arts program, that really improved my written communication abilities and made my writing so much more coherent and concise as opposed to my verbal communication, as you might notice. It taught me how to properly research and construct and evaluate an argument. And even, looking at my own essays and going, okay, can I actually submit this? Does this make any sense? and also through researching sources for these essays and deciding, are these arguments valid? Is there perhaps a bit of bias here? Both are such fantastically well-rounded, versatile degrees. And, I didn't get to study ancient Greek, but I assume it's similar, although I would say that Latin is the better language. So if you're picking one, pick Latin. There's other skills that come with studying any degree, like any degree. That's the organization, time management I mentioned previously. You have to submit assignments on time, you have to prepare for exams. And those are two key skills every employer is looking for. But, if all these skills I've mentioned so far are skills that you value and that you think will be useful to you in later life, and you have a liking for classics, you may as well do what you enjoy while you're gaining them. And Casetta has mentioned as well that there's plenty of other degrees that will leave you with similar skill sets. I often say to people that when the skills I gained studying Latin were the same skills I would have gotten if I had studied politics and English literature and history and maybe like a tiny bit of Italian. But if classics is your passion, you ought to follow it. I could have studied a combination of politics and English literature and history, and I would have gotten the same skill set out of it, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to study Roman politics and Latin literature and ancient history specifically. I don't have much of an interest in anything after that, to be honest. I'm a firm believer that it is in your best interest to pursue a degree that you'll actually enjoy studying. Firstly, you're going to produce a higher quality of work because you genuinely enjoy working on your degree. For example, my thesis, which I handed in a year and 3 months ago, was one of the best things I did in college. And genuinely, one day I sincerely hope I can go back and do it again because it was such a massive passion project for me. But my friends, meanwhile, they were complaining about how they didn't know what they were talking about in their thesis or how they were going to reach the word count or even, if they wanted to do it or that they didn't like the subject they were researching. And while they were talking about that, I was sitting up reading into the wee hours of the night because I had found an absolutely fascinating source I couldn't bring myself to put down. So you're getting this subject you genuinely enjoy, this topic you genuinely enjoy to work on, because in classics, especially in Latin, specifically in Latin, your thesis is quite a flexible thing. So I was working on something I loved, and genuinely that means you get better results because you're working on your assignments, on your thesis and your essays and everything out of want rather than need. So it doesn't feel like a chore the way most things do. It feels like a hobby. And then even better, you leave a really well-rounded person with such a wide variety of skills applicable in so many different industries and careers. You might have noticed from the bios we read out earlier that the folks talking today we're all working in different industries. And you're not just limited to being a teacher or a lecturer or working in a museum, as many people have you think. There are so many more opportunities out there, and we are all proof of that. And, on top of that, and more specific to seeking employment in 2022, as I was doing last year, what I really noticed is that in interviews, a classics degree is a point of interest. It's unfortunately quite rare these days, which hopefully won't be the case for much longer. But even if the subject itself isn't relevant to the job you're applying for, the job specification in the interview, interviewers do tend to ask questions about it just out of curiosity. I have never not had an interview or be fascinated by my degree. And we often end up having this really lengthy discussion about why I did it and what inspired me to pursue classics as a degree, long before we even get into the actual questions about, why are you a decent fit for this job? This is fantastic if you can find a way to relate your degree to the skill set required for the job, because it gives you the opportunity to say, oh, I studied Latin and I got this skill and that skill and I saw that was on the job specification, and there you go, there's proof I can do that. But even if you can't find a way to relate it back, it's a great opportunity to show passion and enthusiasm, which are two things absolutely every employer is looking for. They all want someone with passion and drive who brings a genuine love for what they do to the table. And, on top of that, I will say it is a fantastic icebreaker. Once someone who loves classics gets to talking about classics, they won't stop until you force them. After that, an interview will go as smoothly as anything. Just overall, there is such a wide range of skills you can gain from classics, and there's a wide range of careers you can go into with classics. So that is an immense amount of value it brings any graduate. And building on from that, if it's something you're passionate about, why not study it and see where it leads you? Because there's so many opportunities out there, and you'll gain skills that you need, but also you'll want to gain them. And what more could you possibly want?
That's exactly the point. Thank you, Megan. Thank you very much your enthusiasm and for sharing your passion and for sure the message that we all share. Thank you so much. I now let Luca tell us about the story of his life. Now, Luca and Helen, they join us at 7 a.m. Is that correct? On the other side of the world. So Luca is joining us from Charlotte in North Carolina, and yes, is going to tell us about the story of his life and share some slides, I suppose. Thank you.
Yes, hi everyone. Apologize if I'm a little slow. Probably it's the early time of the day. I didn't warm up yet, but I'll try to do my best. First of all, I'm a little humbled because I heard such good things, and so in such an articulate way that I don't think I can say really much more, in such a deep way. But I'll try to make it even more short and personal, I suppose. Just to give one other, possible path of the many that are possible with classics. So I'll try to share my screen. Right. And can you see the screen? I hope so.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, I guess I even gave a title With or Without You because I really had classics on and off in my life. My beginnings are in a small town in Sardinia, where it was kind of difficult to even access classics, at least in high school. But in Italy, there is a classical high school. Sometimes I think maybe I did this. On one side, I had this passion for things that were different, whether they were different in time or space. So old stuff and stuff and cultures that were far away in space. There was also probably, in my personal, life, this kind of passed on memory of my grandfather, who actually started doing a classical high school in those days. There was a boarding school. It was, it looked far away, but he had to stop and he had to go back farming because in 1929, with the crisis, the family couldn't support him anymore. So he had to go back and, farm the land and get a degree way, way later. So all these ideas about, classics probably were already there, kind of around, but basically it was really like a strange choice because I was the only one in my town back then who decided to study Greek and Latin. So it was just an incredible experience from the start, not only again with the languages, but in general with a lot of things that you learn with the language. And you've been so good in making people really appreciate all the kind of skills that you can get and everywhere. In fact, my career, compared to possibly yours, the ones that we've just heard, was a little more linear, I suppose, but it was more ups and downs, meaning I always had the passion for research and to some degree for teaching. And so the academic career, seemed, from the start a good possibility. But definitely it was not a straight path, meaning in the end, what I ended up doing was definitely not what I could have thought when I did classics. So I guess I chose classics again when it was a time for college. And I had to think about it very well because I had a lot of people who were, more encouraging towards more professionally oriented careers like, law or engineering, these kinds of things. So, after much thinking and, a lot of indecision up until the end, I ended up basically choosing for classics. And it was kind of a choice for passion in a way. But in reality, as I said, it was nothing really linear because I always had, as I said, yeah, and this interest for things that were far away. So one of my early interests from, I guess, even middle school was the New World, these cultures that were so different in the Andes and the Maya and so on. But it kind of went latent for several years until it was basically a month before graduation from my my college that there was a conference, a random happening in Cagliari, and it was a conference on writing in ancient Peru. So that kind of, again, gave me the idea that, if there was something I really wanted to do and I didn't have better ideas, then why not to get organized for that? So again, all these skills and I guess abilities to get organized, have a list of tasks and work towards things. I guess I applied it for the first time then. And so I didn't have the money to go to the US to keep studying. I didn't have English because I didn't really study English until, I was already, well into, my college years. So I just got organized. I took courses. I tried different ways. I got a scholarship to do things that were pretty unrelated and were more local, just to keep working towards that goal. And I ended up basically slowly having these resources. Now, going to the US was another really like elbow kind of curve in my career. And again, it was still in a way academia and teaching, but there was so much more that I learned and that I could apply thanks to all those skills. I entered the field of science applied to archaeology. So some of these these charts that you see in the slide is what I basically do now. It's really biochemistry applied to archaeology. So I really had to in many ways start learning new things, get organized, and also slowly learning all sorts of other skills, because as some of you mentioned, and Michael even as a job knows very well from what I understand, money seeking for research is an incredible thing. Like you really need to spend time almost as a second job. So you not only you do research on the topics, but you also need to do research for the ways to have money to do it. So you, in a way, become like a person who works two jobs, part-time if you're lucky, or maybe full-time plus. And then organized, it's like being the secretary of yourself. So it's really a matter of managing time, meeting deadlines, and so on. In all of this, of course, classics was incredible, and both during the actual study of classics and also applying these skills, I realized so many things. Like there is a lot of logics, as Megan already underlined, and there are these charts that I didn't even know existed until recently, for really the logical structure of sentences that are created. And Latin is definitely a very, very logical language, at least the way it's been taught. I guess we of course we study texts that are more well constructed and written, especially. We study less of the spoken Latin, but it's an incredible opportunity to really develop your skills to put things together, make things fit in a logical sense. And then also a lot of values. The classical world had a lot of contradictions, and definitely, I can say a few words, even on this, but there is a lot of principles, values, and ideas that I think they really can help you become a better person. when you read about, characters like Socrates, or, the opposition to authoritarian rule under Nero, and, different periods of the empire, you really read about people, and they are people who have a lot of, defects and issues like all of us, but they were people, some of them, who could really, like make a huge sacrifice of their own lives for a higher goal. So I think all these things definitely make you, more aware that there is really, good things in life that are worth fighting for, that are worth, living for in a way, and sometimes, at least some people even dying for. So, for example, one of the things that probably without classics I would not have gotten into is politics. And I'm not a member of any party. I could be, but the point is really that I discovered, through those things and values and examples, the importance of just, taking care of collective good. And so when I hear about also unions and trying to fight for what's right, there is so much need of that in today's world. So one of the ways that I got involved in this was also in running for office a couple of times and really losing, for the most part. But I did have some experience in that, and understanding, how difficult it is also to, to have your life, trying to make it, with your work and so on, and also try to give a little bit back. And this picture, for example, is one of the things that I'm most proud of, and it's kind of a coalition of several, members of independentist parties in Sardinia that gathered to just help each other and try to work practically in their, to different tasks in their roles of municipal administration for the most part. So again, classics has a lot to do with politics. So there was a lot of reading about politics. Again, I'm not saying anything new. Some of the speakers already mentioned this. There is a lot of reading about this, and a lot of skills that also in dealing with problems, trying to put together different needs of different people. It's just invaluable. And then I guess my specialization in later years is classics in science, really. And of course, it's not a direct thing, but there is so much that classics gives for just the terminology of science, and also the kind of analysis and, again, attention to details that has been already underlined. This is what I do, basically, dealing with charts like this, dealing with isotopes of different elements. And also, as you can see, there is some Latin here, even in the species, in the scientific names of species that I study from an archaeological point of view through chemistry. So definitely, I work a lot still with Latin and Greek. And some of these tools that I created also for my classes, I could not have done them, at least so confidently, without Greek and Latin. So all these tricks and ways to understand a word even before you know it, just because you learn so many roots that are in every science really today, helped me a lot. So this is really like invaluable. In any situation, you understand you have a secret weapon. It's like one more gear in the speed in understanding things, and so making sense of situations, and tackling them the best way possible. Just to end with something else, one of the things that I've done that is not again directly related to classics, it's from archaeology, but then classics, of course, enters a little bit of everything. Just a story that happened to me recently. I was taking some like a group of American tourists in Sardinia. They wanted to see basically, you know, everything that was possible in one day, going from one end of the island to the other. And you know, as we were just on the car traveling, at some point we were talking about one of these person's name. Her name is Elisa. And as you see, like, you know, the randomness of classics that comes back to your life, I said, you know, just nonchalantly, oh, Elisa, that's Carthage, you know, the foundation of Carthage is related to this character, this lady. It's a really cool name. I never heard it before. And from there, of course, they asked, oh, really, who was this Elisa? And so basically it's Dido in another name. And, you know, all of these things, again, I'm repeating what was already said by other speakers. Conversations can create also the good environment to just click and connect with people. And so in that case, it was just a really, really nice you know, experience in general. That was one of the, you know, again, conversation points and starters, and it ended up to also be the reason for a good tip, I guess, or at least part of the reason for a good tip. So this is really, you know, all I can say. My very personal, you know, relationship with classics in, you know, kind of coming back at different points. And I may be biased because of all the years that I actually studied classics and to some degree also taught it. But as you can see, with very different things that I actually ended up doing. And thank you.
Thanks very much, Luca. Thank you very much for this journey between Sardinia and the States. Very, very interesting. Before we hear about Helen's story, one question that brings you back to Michael, and it is which skills that you learned through your classes degree, or perhaps which experiences influenced your careers? You were telling us about the unexpected and unplanned turns that your career took. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Whether I can talk about those experiences that helped my career, I'm not sure. I went into a little bit of this in my last answer, so I won't take too long over it. But as I said then, the kind of the breadth of things that you're expected to understand or to engage with has been really helpful and influential in the things I have to do now when I'm dealing with a whole range of possible topics to think about. Likewise, the confidence simply to take on that sort of thing is an important skill. Even now, it has really influenced my career. That's something that you get maybe from a lot of subjects, but from something that's immediately so broad and in some ways unfamiliar as classics. I think that's very valuable. I would second too a lot of the things that have been said already, the ability to put together an argument and the influence that studying classics, like a lot of things, history too, has on your ability to write and to present your case. I think that's something that is useful in every line of work and has certainly been useful for me. One thing I didn't get to mention, and I think is important though, is the international dimension of classics. It's on display here already. But when you study ancient history or classics, to a greater degree than in a lot of other subjects, even in the humanities, you are in an international discipline and you have a community of international scholars who are writing about the same sort of topics. But importantly, unlike very often in modern history or in natural sciences, it's in their own languages. So you are expected to engage with scholars working in Italian or French or German, not to mention other languages. And that expectation is kind of freeing in a way. It really challenges you to think, well, I'm not just someone who can take advantage of the fact that I have English as a native language. And also it's nice that you're not forcing other people always to speak English. It's really brings you into a sort of, in my case, European dimension, but also a kind of a transatlantic dimension to your work. You think this is something where it's a common enterprise across a whole range of different countries. So in that way, it's the opposite of a provincial subject, it's a cosmopolitan subject, even if the focus is on mostly ancient Italy, ancient Greece, or the territories of the Roman world or the ancient world. You are really engaged in something that brings together scholars from all around the world. And on a very basic level, as a result of having to learn Italian and French and German, and now Dutch, my life has been really enriched that I have that ability to engage in multiple languages to varying extents, and indeed puts you into contact with people from these cultures too. My partner is originally Belgian, and we met at the Classics conference. So this is precisely the kind of experience that opens you up to.
Thank you very much, Michael. Can I ask people who joined to please mute their microphone, please, because there is a little bit of feedback coming back. Thank you. Okay, we move on to our next speaker, which is Helen Collier. Now, Helen joins us from New York. I'm going to say a couple of words to introduce Helen. So it's very early for you, Helen, 7:22. I hope you have your coffee there. Thank you for joining us at such a early time. So Helen Collier has a BA and a PhD in classics. She grew up in the UK and moved to the US for graduate school. From 2000 to 2022, she was the only full-time classicist at Evergreen State College, a public university in Washington State. She went on to teach classics at the University of Pittsburgh with a joint appointment in philosophy. From 2008 to 2016, Helen was a program officer in scholarly communications at the Andrew Mellon Foundation, funding non-profit publishers, academic libraries, preservation and conservation projects, and digital resources. In summer 2016, she succeeded Adam Blystein as the executive director of the Society for Classical Studies, which is the largest membership organization for classical studies in North America. So welcome very much, Helen. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosetta, and thank you, everyone, for those wonderful presentations. I think a lot of what I'm going to say will echo what's already been said, but I will say something about my career trajectory and things that classics really has taught me. And so I'll start with a personal story, as Luca did. I grew up, like Desmond, in the Midlands in England. I didn't grow up in Birmingham, but I grew up near Birmingham. I was fortunate in secondary school to learn Latin. But when I look back on that, at the time, I think I was very skeptical. I thought, why am I being asked to learn Latin? This is a dead language. This is useless. I very quickly fell in love with the language. I fell in love with the ideas in ancient literature and decided I wanted to study classics in university. At that point, I think it's worth saying that my parents were skeptical. They, I think, were delighted that I was a good Latin student and a classics student, but doing a degree in classics is not something that they had imagined for me, and is not something that they necessarily thought was a good path. My dad was a scientist. My mom was a primary and junior school teacher. She was very interested in history, but modern history. So there was no tradition in my family of studying the ancient world, certainly not at the university level. But I was motivated and I was stubborn, and I said, this is what I want to do. Also, when I look back at myself as sort of a teenager, a young university student, I did love what I was doing. I was fascinated, as I said, by the languages and also by the ideas that I was being exposed to. But I think at that early stage, I also saw the usefulness of what I was doing. I think I had a sense, even though I couldn't articulate it then, I think I knew somewhere in the back of my mind that studying classics was making me a better writer. It was making it easier for me to learn modern languages. It was making it easier for me to think about very complex situations and analyze and synthesize information. And certainly all those things have stood me in good stead in my career. I was someone who, frankly, loved classics so much that I couldn't give it up. So I went on to do a PhD, and then like Michael, to be an academic. Also, much like Michael, it was ultimately personal circumstances that led me to leave the academic track. I was also in a family situation with my husband where, you know, we really needed to make some hard decisions about our careers. So I ended up making a shift, making a change, and then sort of coming back to classics, but in a new way. So I entered the nonprofit world in New York, working for a funding agency. And in that job, I had to learn very quickly a number of new things. I had to learn nonprofit finance. I had to learn how to read financial statements. I had to learn about many other academic disciplines in the arts and humanities that I knew nothing about. I had to start writing for my organization's board of trustees very concise summaries of grant proposals. And those grant proposals could be in the area of very complex digital projects. So having a large technological component. They could be in the area of American history, of civil rights, racial justice. And really the ability to synthesize large amounts of information, to understand what was going on in these grant proposals and why they were important, and put that in a very concise document for our board of trustees. Those were all skills that really come from my undergraduate classics degree. And it was a very steep learning curve for me when I left academia and entered this new role. And so I wouldn't say that it was easy for me to learn all the new things that I had to learn about finance, the law, in fact, especially intellectual property law and other academic fields. But it was definitely my classics undergraduate degree that allowed me to do that. In my current role as the executive director of the Society for Classical Studies, I find myself being inside and outside classics. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, I'm running an organization for classicists, so I am definitely keeping up on trends in the field, and I work with classicists all the time, day in, day out. But a lot of my work, most of my work, is not, of course, research or teaching in classics. It is, again, it's the nonprofit finance aspect. It's making and working with our board of directors on policy. It is dealing with, again, pretty complex, not a very practical way, quite complex technological systems. During the pandemic, we underwent a huge shift, right? We started doing everything remotely for a couple of years. And that's now even continuing now with events such as this. And what I have learned really in the last couple of years particularly is that one important skill from my classics degree was learning the ability or developing the ability to deal with fragmentary evidence and figure out what it amounted to, how to interpret it, and what it meant. So whether you're studying an archaeological site or an ancient text that has been transmitted through hundreds, if not thousands of years of generations and scholars and scribes, you're never getting the whole picture, right? There's always a lot of stuff missing. When archaeologists excavate, even a very well-preserved site, there is so much missing. And most of our ancient texts, in one way or another, have bits missing, or bits that we don't quite understand. A lot of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis is complexity with things missing. So I'll give you an example, and this may seem like a strange analogy, but just bear with me. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, in my organization, we were thinking about, what are we going to do about our annual conference? People come together every year, a couple of thousand people in person, to have an academic conference, to share ideas, to have social events. Well, we can't really do that in early 2021. You know, we pretty much know the pandemic is still going to be a huge factor and will prevent us doing that. So we decided, like many other organizations, to put on a fully remote conference. It was incredibly complex. It involved multiple technological systems. It was something we'd never done before. And to be very honest, we didn't know if it would work as intended until the first day, when everyone tried to log on and the conference was live. Despite all the preparation, the months and months of preparation, we didn't know what would happen. And when we did flip the switch and when the remote conference went live, there were, of course, many problems. There were some people who couldn't log on. The software didn't quite work as we had intended it to work. And in real time, we were dealing with a situation in which we only understood part of the picture, right? We didn't understand exactly what all our attendees were experiencing. We didn't understand exactly what was going on in the back end of the software, and we had to piece it together and problem solve in real time. Now, that's very different from doing an archaeological excavation or doing archaeological research. It's very different in some ways from looking at an ancient text and saying, what's missing? What are we not seeing here? But there's an analogy. The real-time problem solving, when you only have fragments, when you only have bits and pieces, that is something also that I believe I got from my classics degree, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So understanding complex problems, being able to write well about those complex problems, dealing with fragmentary evidence, these are all things that you will get from a classics degree. Another thing that I want to point out just about the field of classics right now is that it's a really exciting field, and it's a changing field. When I was in university in the 1990s, I loved my degree, but looking back on it, I would say the curriculum and the courses that I took were probably those that had been offered for a few decades. Things are really quite different now. Cosetta alluded to this at the beginning. People are beginning to question the boundaries of classics, to question sort of an exclusive focus on Greeks and Romans, to look further afield to other ancient Mediterranean civilizations and further beyond, to think about the ancient world and the pre-modern world more globally and more systematically. That's really exciting. Another exciting shift I see is in technology. When I was in university, we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have multimedia digital projects. All those things are available now, not just for students to consume, but even for students to contribute to. So that's another exciting thing. And again, you'll learn transferable skills in being engaged in those sorts of things. I also feel that another shift that I certainly see in the US is that lecturers, professors, anyone engaged in teaching and instruction is really interested now in students' perspective and students' voices. This means that I think more than ever before, you as students in classics have a voice and have a way to shape the future of the field. Whether or not you go on, right, to do a master's degree or PhD, that doesn't matter. I think you have a really important voice in shaping what the future of classics is, and that's very exciting. So for all those reasons, I would highly recommend classics, both for the transferable skills that everyone has talked about, And also just because, as I said, it is a fascinating and exciting field of study. I can honestly say I've never regretted doing a classics degree. If I had to do my university course over again, I probably still would do classics. And I would be excited to take the type of classics degree that's now being offered to undergraduates. I would actually really love to go back and do a second BA in classics, because it would be quite different from the type of education that I had. And yes, it's something I would highly recommend. So thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this insight. It's wonderful to hear all of these different stories from all around the world, and yet so many things that we share. And clearly the passion is what has brought us here, and it's sort of holding everybody together still. So that's the line I think we're all trying to say: do something you love, and you can only love classics, but we're all very biased as well. So I'm going to welcome our next speaker, who is Helen McVie, so H&M. Apologies. And I leave you the screen now so you can share your slides. Yeah, okay, 1 second. Can you all see the slides?
Yep.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Afternoon. Thank you very much, Cosetta, for inviting me to be here, and thanks to the Department of Ancient Classics as well. Not sure if you can see me. I think I need a box to stand on. So my name's Helen McVie, and as my career has progressed, it has brought me to this point where I'm lucky enough to have my own business. It's a tutoring business teaching Latin and Greek and other courses about the ancient world. So I came to classics through a particularly non-traditional route. I was more of an IT student at school, but ended up taking French and Italian at Further Education College, and then found myself working in administration in a health service. I did my bachelor's degree with the Open University, and having discovered ancient Greek at the OU, I enrolled for a master's at Queen's University Belfast and wrote a dissertation on Homer and the historicity of Troy in the Iliad. But still, classics was my hobby rather than my career, because I was working all the way through. I've had jobs in the public and private sector. I've worked for the body which delivered European Union peace funding to community groups in Northern Ireland in the late 1990s. I was personal assistant to the CEO of the Royal Hospital in Belfast and to the chairman of the Belfast Harbour Commissioners. And most recently, I worked as a primary school classroom assistant. But probably my favourite job was tour guiding. And I led tours around a National Trust property. It is called Patterson's Spade Mill. And there was a time when I could have told you all the details about the Patterson family and how they manufactured the spades. But here I am dressed as a late 19th century farmer's wife, tending fires at the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum. So what have any of these jobs got to do with classics? Well, obviously my love of history is a great help, and the desire to share what I know and ability to remember historical facts was all very helpful with tour guiding, and it was a pleasure to share my knowledge with the visitors. But while I was a classroom assistant, I also coordinated a Greek myths after school club for 9 to 11-year-olds, and the kids loved it. And I think this is very important to remember. If we want classics to survive as a discipline, we need to introduce it to children. And there's no better way to do this than through the stories, through the myths. And each week, the after school club focused on a different myth. The children listened to the story and then completed an art activity. And they were particularly excited the day that we learned the Greek alphabet, and they all had the opportunity to write their names on the board in Greek. And the slide there is just a selection of what they did during the weeks of the class. And you can see somebody's written their name in Greek there. But how then does a classics degree help with performing an office job? Well, during my degree, I learned time management skills, problem solving skills, and the importance of attention to detail. And these are all essential skills for the workplace and have all been mentioned before by previous speakers. Alongside these 9-to-5 jobs, I was teaching ancient Greek at evening classes for Queen's University, and I was teaching my own students on both a one-to-one and a group basis. Thanks to Dr. Evelyn Braca, a graduate of Maynooth University, I had the opportunity to teach in Lampeter in Wales at the summer workshop from 2011 to 2013. And the atmosphere at the workshop, it was one of community and a shared passion for the ancient world. And teaching there was a wonderful experience, and I was inspired by the dedication and commitment of both the tutors and the students. And by the time I was teaching in Wales, I had my daughter, and we held her 4th birthday party in a small church hall near Queen's University in Belfast. Now, bear with me, this is relevant. The hall was underused, and the church was glad of the income it received by hiring it out. And this got me thinking about Greek and Latin and how and where they could be taught in Belfast, and the Belfast Summer School was born. In 2016, 11 students and 2 tutors, myself and Dr. Kerry Phelan, another Maynooth graduate, met to study Greek. The summer school has grown from there, and in 2019, the last one we had before the pandemic, we hosted 35 students and 7 staff at Queen's University Belfast. But by the end of 2019, the balance between teaching at night and the day job became too much to maintain, and I took a leap of faith and resigned from the steady, reliable day job in order to teach Greek on a full-time basis. A few months later, and the world was in COVID lockdown. So my local students moved online, but now I discovered that my potential audience had gone global. So I thought I had to cancel the 2020 Belfast Summer School, but a number of students requested a course online. So I got to thinking, I got to work, and after a few weeks of advertising, the 2020 Belfast Summer School took place, providing intensive courses in Latin and Greek to over 100 students from Ireland, the UK, Europe, and the USA. And since then, I began offering weekly classes to students from all around the world. And now online learning is no longer strange or something to be feared. And my map of student locations has extended to all continents, with students attending classes from North and South America, South Africa, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, India, and Hong Kong. And my group of tutors comprises classicists and ancient historians in the UK, Ireland, Spain, and the USA. So who are the students? Well, I took a quick poll of incoming enrolments, and this revealed we had a postal delivery worker, an HR professional, university administrator, marketing manager, consultant obstetrician, solicitors, teachers, museum curators, and a pharmacist. So such a variety of people wanting to learn Greek and Latin. We also help PhD candidates who need the languages for their research, and high school students whose schools do not offer Greek or Latin, and many of our students are retired. This year, 2022, as well as a virtual summer school, we held an in-person Belfast summer school at Queen's University Belfast. I can't deny that I've missed the camaraderie of a classroom and chatting with students and other tutors over a coffee. And all in all, however, though, teaching online has worked well for me and my students. You know, some people might complain about, you know, they miss the in-person, the classroom setting, but it has really worked well. My first two GCSE Greek students gained A-star grades, and earlier this year I had a group of 5 mature students, and they took the GCSE and they gained A and A-star grades, so I couldn't have been happier. Between my tutors and myself, we'll be preparing a number of GCSE and A-level students for their examinations in 2023 and 24, and all the students are being taught online. So since lockdown in 2020, I've stumbled upon a niche which students across the globe have been seeking. And through social media and email lists and word of mouth, I've been able to spread the word. And in 2021, I had over 200 students in Classics Academy classes. I feel humbled to be able to help so many people around the world on their journey with ancient Greek and Latin. Now, as I've said before, not everyone, as has been said before, not everyone knows what classics is. Is it books? Is it music? I think every classicist has been asked one of those questions. But many people are surprised to find that classics has something for everyone. There's myth, philosophy, politics, art, history, poetry, archaeology, and I'm sure there's more that I've missed there. But I would urge anyone who is uncertain to give it a go, and I guarantee you'll love it. And as Cosetta said, we're all biased here, but what's not to love? Exactly. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to invite our last speaker for today, Rachel Travers, and I know that we are cutting the time a little bit short, so I would urge if anybody has any questions to please put them in the chat, and I'll see to it now in a second. Thank you very much, Rachel. Yeah. You should see the slides now in a second. Okay,
thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Cosetta. And as everyone said, it's been an absolute honour to be here today. So I'm really happy to return to Maynooth. I know, again, Cosetta gave me a lovely bio at the very start. But in true professional recruitment style, I've given you a snippet of my CV. I'm not going to talk all about the CV, but just to give you an idea of, I suppose, the progression with my kind of qualifications, and then as well with the experience that I've had over the past 10 years professionally. So there's people on the call today and also lecturers here that probably don't know this about me, but when I came to Maynooth first, Greek and Roman civilization was not on my list for choice. And I happened to go to a lecture with one of my friends, and she brought me along. We had a really interesting, insightful lecture. And it was at that point that I decided, yeah, this is definitely what I want as my, at the time, third choice. And as you can see, it wasn't just my third choice. I did a master's in it, so I ended up absolutely loving it. And I think the common theme for today is you have to do what you love, and I absolutely loved it. When I finished in school, I wanted to train to be a teacher. I loved education. I loved everything to do with kind of imparting knowledge onto other people, especially about history. And mainly I looked at modern history, so much more recent than ancient Greek and Roman history. And I thought that I wanted to be a teacher, and at the time the careers guidance teacher counsellor in the school had said to me, well, if you study history and maybe a language, that will guide you down that route to get you into teaching, history and Spanish are on the curriculum. Spanish is a language that you've, spoken all around the world, so you can go and travel with it. But eventually, I actually realised I really loved Greek and Roman civilization and the history, and I just had to do what I really, really loved. So that was kind of my path to completing the Bachelor of Arts and then going on to do the Masters. And then I still had this in my mind that I did want to be a teacher, and I transferred to University College Dublin to study to train to teach history and classical studies. And I had an absolutely excellent classics methods teacher there, who's a principal in Dublin, Colin Dooney, and he, again, was so passionate about imparting that knowledge. And I think a couple of people have really touched on that today. For us to get people interested in the ancient world, it's really important to start young. And that's what I loved. I really wanted to do that. And I worked for 2 years as a substitute teacher, teaching classics, and also as a learning support teacher, so working with children with special educational needs. I absolutely loved it, but I knew in my own kind of heart and soul that on my end I was more of a professional, but I wanted to stay in education, and that's how I suppose fell into recruitment in an educational setting. So I've been working with Engage Education Ireland since 2014. With Engage Education Ireland, what we do is we hire teachers, not just from Ireland, but internationally as well. So we have a lot of EU teachers, we've a Canadian office, we have an Australian office, we have a South African office that helps teachers from all over those countries, and not just limited to those countries, get jobs for schools in England. So my thought process on getting that job with Engage Education Ireland was, I suppose, although I wasn't going to teach, I was helping teachers and passionate teachers get into really interesting jobs in schools in England. And that was my thought process with kind of going into that role. So did I see myself as a recruitment professional? Yes, but also more along the lines again of, guidance counselling and kind of helping people find the right job. And the skills that I learned from the history and ancient Greek and Roman civilization courses that we did, they really helped me to, I suppose, listen and help to understand, what people wanted, and, listen to their own experiences and understand how we could help them. And also just to be kind of, sorry, I click across on this, just also to be, I've lost my train of thought, clicking on the thing. Yeah, so just to listen to people and also to make sure as well that people were properly represented in what they wanted, the types of schools they wanted to work in, the locations that they wanted to live in, and to take all of those things and to come up with the best kind of opportunity that was fair and kind of fitted to what they were looking for as well. So I think I learned a lot about that through studying the Greek and Roman civilization and then the classics degree as well. My current role in Engage Education Ireland, I'm team leader or manager of the Irish office. And again, when I first sat down to send an email to a client, to one of our schools in England, so people who were, let's say classes maybe above my rank, I didn't feel like I wasn't capable of doing that, because I'd written essays and I'd had conferences that, where I'd spoken to, I suppose, people who were really educated and very specialised in their sector. And I wasn't afraid to do that because I've been able to have those difficult conversations and have the interactions with them prior to entering into the working world. So again, people could say that that is probably, a part of college life, that's something that you do anyway. But I really feel like classics, and particularly in Maynooth, is a very safe place to learn and a healthy environment to have conversations where you might have a view on something that's not the same as somebody else, or perhaps you're trying to dissect a particular argument, and that view, whether you have it, if you feel like it's correct or it's important to you, and you're able to kind of articulate that properly. So for me, the skills that I kind of learned from that was a very safe and healthy space for me to learn that. And at the moment, I'm working Again, I kind of put, the couple of arrows there because I feel like it's quite cyclical, with what I've kind of done. I started off the university, I've gone into teaching and education. I've done the recruitment, the professional side of things. The company that I'm currently working for has a salaried PGCE, postgraduate certificate in education. And I suppose, again, I'm touching back into getting into education and working with kind of key players who are able to enroll and hire the best of the best, and the people who are passionate, the people who really want to teach and instill and impart their knowledge on students, whether that's in primary or secondary school. So I'm doing that with our company, and then also through the University of Coventry, which has now been rebranded to the National Institute for Teaching and Education in England. And then I put the other arrow back because, who knows what's next. I do probably all classicists, or, anyone who studies classics would say they love to learn, they love to know more. And so who knows, maybe I'll pick a course or do short courses in the future. We're always developing, we're always learning. And yeah, I think I have a lot to thank for, classics, and also for Maynooth. And this is just, again, I just wanted to just kind of, this is some of the things I've been talking about, some of the kind of skills. Everyone's spoken about the skills, so I won't repeat on them. But I suppose the experience and the people that you meet, you're meeting with people who are like you, who are not like you, and you're able to, make friendships, I suppose, that last for a long time. And yeah, and go to places, as I think Desmond said, about going to the classical or the Irish Institute of Hellenic Studies in Athens, their tour. We went on that tour as well, which is some of the pictures in the middle. The picture on the far right is one of the girls in the class drew that for us. We were at our final exams. That's myself and Linda Kenny in the front. And then, as you can tell, that's our graduation as well. So, just graduating from that, which is a fantastic achievement. So, I won't go back on the skill, the skills in too much more detail, but I do have a lot to thank for classics, and I'm so happy to be here today. I know that we're running up on time, so I think I'll finish there. And if anyone has any questions, I'll pass back to you, Cassetta.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Rachel. I'm just gonna close our slides, and we are at the end of our event today. So I'm just checking here if there are any questions. If I know that we have, I've put together with the speakers all these questions, and they are questions that came up in the survey this year. So the majority of the points, I suppose, that every speaker has spoken about are questions the students wanted to hear answers to. However, if there are any other questions that anybody would like to ask, now is the time. Please let us know. I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay. As we are at the end of our event, I'm just gonna stop the recording now in a second. And I just want to remind everybody the recording of this event will be available on the Maynooth University YouTube channel in a couple of days. So if anyone knows of anyone who wanted to join, I certainly have a very long list of people who couldn't make it today but would like to hear what everybody has to say. They can still access the recording to the event online. So before we close, I just want to have a final round of applause for all of our speakers who have done a great job at sharing their experience with us. And I certainly felt that the passion and the enthusiasm for the classics is something that keeps us all together, but is still very much alive and something that we really love to share. And we want to make it part, I suppose, of the professional investment of students. I see a couple of messages of thank you on the chat. So thank you, everybody. Everybody clap. Thanks, everyone, again, especially to the speakers from the States for joining us at such an early time in New York and in Charlotte. Thank you, everybody. See you next year.